Hey everyone, welcome back to the Inside Integration Podcast. It's just me this week, Chris. Jayson is out on the road with our good friend Scott from Sonance, visiting some dealers up in the Pacific Northwest. And you might remember Scott from, I think, episode one of the show and a pretty recent episode where he came back on and atoned for giving us the idea to put on this circus. So hopefully they're having a good time, but you are stuck with me this week. Really excited about the topic. It's going to be a little bit different, and hopefully, I don't awkward silence and you guys to death without having Jayson to bounce things off of and go back and forth. But what we're going to be talking about is challenges facing custom integrators in 2024 and 2025 and beyond, because it's been quite a year. It's been quite a few years, honestly. And for those of you who don't know, I have been in this industry a long time, mostly on the other side of the fence from the rep side, as a programmer, a technician, a project manager. I've worked for companies on both coasts, small jobs, some of the biggest mega projects that are out there. And, I love this stuff. So, being able to speak about what challenges custom integrators are facing is something that I'm super stoked about. So, buckle in, and hopefully this won't be too awkward for anybody. So let's dive into our first topic, which is supply chain disruptions, which are still a reality. They're not exactly new. We've been dealing with these things for a long time, since the pandemic, and it's still a big headache that we're all facing as integrators. There's just, there's nothing worse than having to wait a little bit longer for a set of in-wall speakers, or a little widget, or whatever it is, something that you need to make a rack whole to be able to get that project done. And it impacts entire projects. And hearing from a lot of you guys that it's really hard to give a client a solid timeline because of all this uncertainty. And it's never a good feeling when homeowners are breathing down your neck, builders breathing down your neck, your trade partners are breathing down your neck, and they're all wondering why things can't get done. Now, it saves us a little bit because, our supply chain problems are obviously ours, but there's also, building materials that are difficult to get. And a lot of these things have gotten better along the way, but we're still not out of the woods. I remember running into this stuff when I had a business of my own, even way before the pandemic. Sometimes manufacturers promise things and they're supposed to come out next quarter, and it just never does, or something needed to get reimagined, or however that was. And when you're juggling multiple projects, like as soon as that first domino goes, it can just be chaos. So I can tell you, it's not an easy situation. But one of the things that I've always recommended, and I know it's not always easy, it's downright difficult, is to get more strategic with your purchasing, which is, you get in there, somebody in your org needs to be, hands-on purchasing. And what I mean by that is looking at projects ahead, figuring out, what your timelines are, whether that's in a Gantt chart or just kind of forecasting, or, an all hands meeting where you guys, we discuss things. But, having one person, or the principal, or whoever that may be, being the one who does all the ordering, it usually doesn't work out so good, because you kind of need somebody riding riding on the back of your purchasing. And that person needs to have some institutional knowledge of, hey, what happened last time when we specified this specific piece of gear? Or you remember when we used this thing on this project? Do you remember how long that took to get? Like, having that kind of insight, and being able to rely on your experience with a certain manufacturer, or a certain distributor, or a logistics company, or whatever it was. If you can flat out say, and I'm just giving an example here, but if you had a great experience with Sony last time you ordered the stuff from TD Synnex or whoever it was, the stuff came on time, it was great, then maybe that's a product that you want to do more often, instead of, if you're having a different experience with a different display brand, or a different rack manufacturer, a different seating company, or whatever that may be. There's also a lot of value in getting real familiar with your local distributors, whether that's Snap One or Mountain West or, whoever that may be, ADI or whoever. Um, get a relationship going with those guys, because oftentimes like that can save your butt. You can, you're, hey, I'm in a jam and I need this thing. And well, maybe they have it on stock, maybe it's on the shelf. And along the same lines as that, it behooves you to look at some of these trade groups that you may already be a part of, right? ProSource, HTSA, HTA, Azione. These guys, this group of your peers are kind of ready made, and a lot of these, in my experience, and I've had to lean on this a few times, where you reach out to somebody and your introduction is, "Hey, we're both in ProSource. I'm in this territory. I'm having a tough time getting these. I know that you're an XYZ dealer. Is there any chance that you might have this thing on a shelf, maybe for a project that you don't need for another 8 months, that, you could send my way? I'll make it worth your while, whatever it is." Those kind of relationships, your relationships with distributors, your relationship with your trade groups, and even, I mean, I know it might be a bad word here, but even your local competition, right? Like, we're all in the same boat. And yeah, obviously the last thing you want to do is to reach out to, your local competition, but hey, you help them, maybe someday they help you. It helps us all kind of get past the same bottlenecks. And that makes this industry kind of flow a little bit better. And even keeping your clients informed takes a lot of that pressure off as well. Like there's a lot to be said for, you know, trying to mitigate it ahead of time with planning and your relationships, but just being transparent with your client, that goes a long way. Like, hey, delays are a fact of life with everything. Even a lot of stuff that your clients are dealing with other parts of their home that they're building, or other parts of their project, or maybe they can't get their granite countertop for an additional 8 months or whatever it is. It goes a long way to be clear with your client and your builder that, hey, we're experiencing these delays. We ordered this stuff months ago, and all of our ducks were in a row, but this is just something that can't be avoided. We could specify something else. We could go in a different direction, or we could wait. Here's how this is going to impact your project timeline and what we do. And your clients will appreciate that. Your builder partners, your trade partners, they'll all appreciate that as well. And that transparency, it goes a long way in building and maintaining that trust, both with your clients and with your project team. So, plan ahead when you can. Stock stuff way before you might think you need it. Everybody's in this world of just on time inventory. Hey, maybe grab an extra TV in a common size just to make sure that you have it, and rotate your stock and sell it through as you go, because then at least that way you have a backstop. But be transparent. Let people know what's going on. Hey, I am working my butt off for you to make sure that we get this stuff here. This is something that's out of my control. This is how we can adapt. We can move forward this way. Or to make it perfect, we could wait. And here's the estimate that I have. What would you like to do, Mr. Client? We work for you. Sometimes that works. That's that's a good way to build that trust. Second topic I want to bring up is finding and retaining skilled labor. And this is a thing with everybody I talk to, and has been for a really long time. Let me tell a little story here. When I was on the East Coast, the spot that I was in wasn't a super populated area. We were fortunate enough to have a lot of really, really big jobs. This is at the Jersey Shore. There wasn't a ton of competition, a ton of intense competition, but there also weren't a lot of people who were in the industry. And my partner and I kind of got to the point where we were running ourselves ragged, because we were each doing our halves of the business and making sure things were covered, but we knew that we needed to expand, and we knew that we needed to do it pretty quickly. What we did was we went to our local vocational school, which, after moving to the West Coast, I've found out doesn't really exist in all places. It existed in New Jersey. Maybe it exists where you are. It does not seem to exist in Orange County. But we went to the school. We talked to the person who runs the electrical program at the school, and essentially said, hey, if there's you've got this electrical program, you've got a pretty steady stream of people coming through here, getting trained to become electricians as their vocation. Um, I'm sure that there are people who come through here who, maybe you're doing this because they want to learn a trade, but we want to tell you about this other world that exists in low voltage and custom integration. And maybe there's some kids who want to go that way with it. Maybe there's, we do fun stuff, right? Maybe, maybe they would rather hang TVs than put up breaker panels and connect services and do that sort of thing. And we got a really good relationship going with our local, vocational school to you know, get them kind of scouting for us, I guess. We got to go in there and make some presentations, and we ended up, two of the best people we've ever hired were straight out of there with zero custom integrator experience, that were, they liked electrical just fine, but it wasn't somewhere that they saw themselves. We maybe gave them an alternative, and they worked out great. Two of the best kids that I think I've ever hired. And that was our challenge. And that seems to have been, that seems to be a challenge for most people that I talk to, where, the demand for smart homes and for custom integration and for all of these, technology systems in people's homes are outstripping the amount of talent available to work for custom integration firms, whether they're big firms or small firms or whatever it is. And it is really hard to get people into this and knowing who we are as an industry. And if you go a couple episodes back, there's a CEDIA initiative right now to get this classified as a vocation. That might help that situation a little bit. I encourage you to go back. I'll add the link to the description and everything else. But it is super difficult unless you're pulling guys who are working for your competition, or getting guys in and training them yourselves and everything else. It is really super hard to fill all of these roles. And it means that there's, a lot of integrators who are competing in the same talent pool. And we're also competing against people who are getting pulled into other industries. And there's not a whole lot of folks out there that are pulling in here. I look at the map, and there are a ton of guys who have been in this for 20 years and look a lot like me, and who, maybe can't go in a crawl space anymore, maybe go in the attic anymore, or, do these other tasks, that we all did in the beginning stages of our career. And, that's the reality. That gap is coming, and we're already seeing some of the effects, but it's just going to get worse and worse. So besides, my story and my analogy of, going to your local trade schools, try and get people in who, have the intangibles, right? Like they show up on time, they're willing to learn, maybe they have a little bit of a, you can identify that they're a little bit into this stuff. That's car audio installers are great for this kind of thing, because, hey, I mean, who wants to crawl underneath a dashboard? That's how I started way back when. I believe that's how Jayson started way back when. Those are places to look as well. But what's probably more important than even just getting them in the door, is getting them trained up in your specific, mentality, or your ethos, the ethos of your company, that kind of thing, getting them into your corporate, your mindset and your company why, for lack of a better word. When I was looking for techs, I would always try to hire for potential over perfection, right? Like if somebody's got the right mindset and they're willing to learn, you can teach them all the skills. What we do, it's not rocket surgery, right? It's not super crazy. Yeah, there's a lot involved, and there's a lot that goes into training somebody how to work in a high-end home without, causing damage, or teaching people to be careful around in finished homes that are many times their yearly salary, and that sort of thing. Training them up for those things, but also make sure that you're training your guys on the products that you do, and in order to do that, you should be leaning on your manufacturers to provide these trainings, and making sure that your technicians can do these trainings. So what I mean by this is, Josh AI is out there doing trainings constantly. Sony is out there doing trainings constantly. There's a ton of, there's a wealth of things that are available online that you can, park one of your guys in a cube, say, okay, hey, you know what? Every second Tuesday is training day, and you need to go through these courses and do them. And then, when Josh AI comes to town and does a live event, like they're doing in the Pacific Northwest next week, there's my plug. Make sure that they're able to attend that, because that's going to make them stronger. That's going to demonstrate that you're investing in them, and that's going to retain them, a lot longer than if you weren't doing those things. These resources from the manufacturers are free. They are free in terms of, the event is free. They'll feed you. It's usually a requirement to maintain their line and that kind of thing. The only thing it costs is, that person's salary or wage for the day. And that's a worthwhile investment every single time. And turning a green technician into a pro, it demonstrates that you as a business owner, or, you as a manager or whatever, that you are willing to invest in them. And that's something that in this day of having a tough time retaining people, that goes a long way. It really does. Besides that, it contributes to your company culture, right? If all you guys, and this sounds totally fluffy, right? But strong company culture is maybe the most important thing, right? It shows, it gets people doing things the way that the rest of your school of salmon is doing them. And it kind of keeps everybody, on the same path, moving forward in the direction that you as a company want to go in. But building these things and sending your guys to these events, it kind of shows what else is out there, right? Like, okay, yeah, this is a trade that I want to be in. I like being part of this thing that's larger than just my company. And hey, these people are like me, and you're trading tips and people are making contacts. They, folks tend to stick around when they feel like they belong. And aside from just staying within your organization, them staying within, our larger custom integration thing, instead of, you know, bailing out and, going to work in fast food, or going to work in another trade, or becoming a, construction foreman, or whatever it is. Um, this industry is about relationships, and, keeping people in here, and kind of fostering folks who, might really enjoy doing this sort of thing. So training and retaining, that's super important. That investment will go so far. Getting everybody to feel like they are a part of your company culture, that's almost as important. And then, helping people feel like they're part of this larger community is, is extremely important, just for the health of our industry in general. The third point I want to hit is keeping up with rapidly evolving technology. And obviously, we are in the technology business. Technology is expanding just at light speed these days, or at least it seems like it. I've been on projects where you know, you're getting through it, and it's a 2-year long project, and you started, you're specifying 4K video distribution, and by the end of that project, your client is asking about, hey, what about 8K, or what about this new source, or how do we incorporate this, that, or the other thing. And keeping up on this stuff, it is not easy, especially when you're managing clients, you're managing your employees, you're managing multiple projects, you're trying to keep everybody happy. So, keeping up with this technology, I mean, it feels like it's a full-time job in itself, but that's the job, right? Like, keeping up with evolving technology is the core of what we do, right? Like, we're custom integrators, and, we're doing this to, to further technology. We're trying to make technology easy for somebody who may not know much about technology, but wants it. And, they want all these things. And, your clients are probably already coming to you armed with a little bit of knowledge because of what they see that's out there, what's on Instagram, or what they see their friends posting on Facebook, where, hey, what about AI home automation, or what about voice control, or, what about this source, or this streaming box, or this new music service, or whatever it is. It's what we do has to encompass all of this stuff. It's not just about knowing our core systems and that kind of thing, although that is paramount. you've got to be at least aware of what the cutting edge stuff that's coming up the pipe, because that's what people are going to ask us about, and that's what they're paying us to do. Um, so I highly suggest making continuously learning. Continuous learning needs to be a part of your business strategy, and there's a ton of ways. Again, with evolving technology, the ways for us to consume this information has definitely gotten a lot more. Right, gone are the days where I still read CE Pro, but gone are the days of, flipping through a physical magazine, um, and seeing these things, or, relying just on your rep to come by and tell you about what all these things are. There's a ton of ways you can get this information, right? CE Pro, residential systems, dealer scope. You've got all these great online things that, CDA was not too long ago. Everybody has a CDA recap, including us. And it's all, you can find all this information that's out there, even if you didn't attend the show. There's also, some great podcasts. If you're listening to this right now, you are aware that there are podcasts in the custom integration space, most of them that are a heck of a lot better than ours. Things like AV Trade Talk with our friend Katie Bennett, Residential Tech Talks with the guys from Residential Tech. And, these are great resources as well. It's an easy listen, half hour in the van on a way to the job site. If you're listening to it, if you're getting your team and your employees kind of in the habit of like, hey, you guys need to be up on this stuff because this is what we do for a living. If you kind of make that part of your philosophy, it gets a lot easier. And these trends, they come out, and that way, we're the first ones to hear about them. We can play our role as, the concierge of cool, or the technology of experts. And that way we're not out of the loop, and it doesn't take too much of your day to stay up to speed on this stuff. And of course, I'd be I'd be remiss if I didn't plug our own stuff, our own podcast, Inside Integration. We try and cover, a lot of stuff like this podcast right here, where I was scrambling at the last second because, suddenly Jayson was unavailable. So our usual, BS back and forth kind of had to take a back seat to something that's more like this. Subscribe, come and listen to this more, even if you're not in the industry. Like, hey, we're here to help. There's also a massive amount of resources. And again, technology has made these things a lot easier to access and a lot easier to put out, right? So, some of our partner companies like Josh AI, they have a full-blown training program. They have a ton of YouTube videos to see how things are implemented. Sony is really getting things out there and getting these up to speed as these new Bravia models are coming out. There are a ton of videos being released by their CI division that are, here to make you aware of what these products are even before you have them in your hands, so that you're ready to, to rock and roll and deploy. Manufacturers are updating their products all the time, and between their resources and us as your representatives, that's where you can find this info. Come to us. We can steer you in the right direction or get wherever. There's also something to be said for other professionals, right? So yeah, it's one thing to take the word of the manufacturer. It's one thing to take the word of the rep or whatever, but attending these trade shows and these CEDIA regionals and Lightapalooza and CEDIA Expo and all these other things, these are super important. As you own conferences and pro source conferences, it's important to be able to interface with other professionals and see where they're having success with some of these products. See where, hey, have you done that new thing yet? Yeah, I have. And here's how it went. It was like this. And these are some of the pitfalls to avoid, and that kind of thing. That professional networking, I mean, it's invaluable. You can really see how people are doing things and maybe examine your own process and refine it if needed. And again, just to, shamelessly plug our own stuff. Our Oliver Marketing YouTube channel has a ton of content on it. We're adding more all the time. Definitely not adding it as fast as I'd like to, but I'm working on that. We should have some stuff for Mad VR. We should have some new Sony stuff up there, but there's things on there that are introductions to lines, different behind the scenes things that, may help you. And following us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all those things, that's all, kind of part of our, our full press, to serve you as dealers. We try to post, what the latest trends are, what things are coming out, what the manufacturers are putting out there. And, again, I mentioned it earlier. We have a Josh AI training that is coming up at the beginning of October in the Pacific Northwest. We have a date in Seattle or Bellevue, and we have a date down by Portland. And, these are great events to be a part of. Hit us up. We can get you in there and get you up to speed on these products. We've also got a couple of events that are coming up. These are going to be really fun. I'm not exactly sure how the travel is going to work, but they're basically 3 days in a row. My travel itself, because we are doing an event with Lucetta on the 28th of October in San Jose, on the 29th of October in Beaverton up by Portland, and on the 30th of October in Bellevue near Seattle. So 3 days in a row. These events are at Topgolf. It is a great opportunity to get out there. And again, check our website, check our events page for more details, and I'll throw some links in our description. But essentially what it is Lucetta, or, elemental LED training. It's a great event. It's held at Topgolf. So there's going to be some training, there's going to be some networking, and there's going to be some golf, and, it's an open bar. There's plenty of food there, networking with your peers, networking with, the Lucetta, and asking whatever questions you might want. It's going to be 3 great events in 3 great markets, 3 days in a row. So again, I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to make it to all 3 of those. But yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and we're really looking forward to it. It's also the perfect event to bring your trade partners to. So if you've got you got a builder you're close with who, you want to get them thinking more about linear lighting and how linear lighting can kind of help distinguish their projects, bring them along. It's a great way to entertain your trade partners on Lucetta's dime. Like, bring them in, like, get them up to speed, show them the love, and it doesn't come out of your pocket. That's the best part. So, definitely look for those. They're on our events page, or check your email. We've been sending out emails about them. So, yeah, that brings me to the 4th point that I want to hit, which is shifting client expectations. Speaking, with clients, this has been a massive shift. People are so much more informed now, whereas 20 years ago, they didn't quite know what they wanted. They really trusted us to tell them a little bit more about what was possible and kind of shift them. And yeah, I want music here. And we come in as the experts in design and stuff. Now, clients are coming in with a ton of research under their belts. They're watching YouTube videos. They're reading tech blogs. They might even be listening to this podcast itself. So thank you for listening. Really appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button. But they're coming in with very specific ideas of what they want. They want lighting control. They want Vantage lighting control. They want this kind of keypad. They want, these shades that they saw, wherever, or that were introduced by their designer or whoever. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That really just means that we need to really endeavor to manage those expectations where, if they're only seeing the sizzle and what's what it takes to do these things, that's where your expertise as an integrator really comes into play. Getting them to understand that, hey, those things are amazing. However, the budget that we've worked through here doesn't really allow us to do this. So we would need to do this instead and do those sort of things. And I mean, I've been on plenty of client projects where the client wants the works, they want full automation, they want this, they want that. And they didn't quite realize that the budget is very important here, because doing X takes this many hours, or, this is, 65 hours to be able to do this sort of thing in here based on what you want. And, you need to have those conversations up front, right? Like, this is probably the most important part about what we do. We're not used car salesmen. We're not trying to bait and switch or do anything untoward. We're really trying to be that Sherpa that guides a homeowner through their, custom integration and home electronics journey and make their life better with technology. And if you can position yourself as an expert and offer alternatives where you need to, and kind of, get a good handle on what they're looking for in general terms, right? Like, hey, we want, we want this thing and we want that thing. Well, we can accomplish that goal with these products that we install and we trust and that kind of thing. You're the expert, right? Like, act like it. And that's a huge value add to their project is now, you're the guy who is their technology Sherpa, right? Like you're the wizard, and being able to move people through those conversations, being able to move their builder through those conversations, because that happens a lot of times too. There's some translation in the line, where you're able to take their dream and take what they expect technology wise and turn that into an experience, which is really what they're looking for, right? Like nobody comes in and says, I want this lighting system because it's cool or whatever. Like, no, the experience that they want is easy control of their lights. They want to be able to, they want their lighting system to, to create magic. They want their audio system to, allow them this awesome lifestyle of just a soundtrack playing at all times. They want, their home automation system to be as easy to control as just saying a command to the air. That's what they're looking for. They want that experience. And when they come in with, some ideas, being able to translate those ideas and those notions into what their experience is going to be and hit all those marks, it's going to make you just the king of the project. So along those same lines is point number 5, which is pricing and competition pressure. So one of the toughest things about being in this industry is dealing with price pressure, right? Like now you've got DIY products that are out there that are available from Amazon that claim to be able to do the same things. They can walk in, a client can walk into a Best Buy, pick up a whole bunch of smart home gear, and hey, it all says it's, Apple HomeKit compatible on it and that kind of thing. And in theory, they can do what they want to accomplish for a fraction of what we charge, and they could do it themselves without another contractor involved. But they don't realize what they're missing until it's too late, until they've got a stack of gear and no time to do it themselves, and it's not working out the right way because they're a hedge fund manager, or they're a celebrity, or there's some other kind of business titan that they're not. We live and breathe this stuff every single day, and they don't, and that's just the reality of it. I've always told clients and dealers as well, professional integration is about way more than just the gear. So if you're positioning yourself as a gear seller instead of an experience seller, you're kind of barking up the wrong tree, right? Anybody can buy a TV. Anybody could buy a set of smart light bulbs or whatever it is. But what happens when you get these things home and they don't work together the way you expect them to? Like, who are you going to call? It's the same thing as I believe it was an H&R Block ad where, the man and a woman are talking about doing their tax returns, and he says, hey, I got this software. It's, it's in this box. And, versus going to a tax professional or whatever, and they have a problem with it. And the wife says condescendingly, well, why don't you ask the box? And it's the same thing that we deal with, right? Like part of what people are retaining our services for is to work that, is to make sure that, their expectations are met. That's why you pay people. What happens on a weekend when they put in their own, network or, some TP-Link thing off the shelf at, Target or whatever. And, the kid has a slumber party and the whole network crashes because there's a ton of clients on it, because every kid at that party has 3 smart devices that they're bringing into the home. That's what we do, right? We sell that experience. We make sure that we're giving them that peace of mind, and solving those problems before they even know that they're going to have those problems. So don't shy away from those conversations. Be able to explain what the difference between getting all these boxes at Best Buy and doing it yourself versus, having a technology professional who, can mitigate this stuff and to make it not even be a problem before you even know it's a problem. And at the same time, and related to this is the service aspect of it, right? We've been, as integrators, we've kind of been, battered over and over and over again by, sell service plans. And that is absolutely the truth, because that service plan depending on how you structure it, it is that peace of mind. It is putting a dollar value on peace of mind. It is putting a dollar value on responsiveness, that somebody is going to answer the phone when the football game doesn't come on the weekend. When there's, hey, my network slowed way down, and I got all these kids in my house and that kind of thing. That's what you're paying for, and that's what DIY systems just do not offer. And that's something in our favor. So being able to talk candidly about that experience where, you're wrapping this into, hey, if you really want to do it yourself, that's great. Here's a couple of things that you could expect. This is my number. If you decide to reconsider, great. Here are the things that I bring to the table. I've been doing this for 20 years. I've done projects in your neighborhood. I've done projects for your friends. They're all very happy with me. I offer a service plan. Hey, have at it. That's super important. So there you have it. Those are some of the biggest challenges that are facing integrators based on conversations and based on kind of knowing this industry. These are the things that are facing integrators in 2024 and probably will still be in 2025. We've got supply chain disruptions, which, hey, everybody thought was a thing of the past, but they're still with us. Skilled labor shortages, rapidly evolving technology, shifting customer expectations, and pricing pressure. None of these things are easy, but like I said earlier, we've all been in business long enough to know that with every challenge comes an opportunity. So being able to address these things, and again, these are just ideas. That's just like my top 5. I'm sure there's a ton more, um, for sure. Depending on what lines you install, there's probably a ton more. But that's just from my own head. I'd love to hear from you guys, and what challenges are you seeing? I get to talk to dealers when I'm out in the field. I have a good relationship with a lot of dealers, including the guys who are on my shirt, Northern Technology. Jamie is just an absolute peach of a human being. We've had him on a show. Look that one up. It's a good one. He's got some great stories about integration in Alaska. But shoot me a message. If I'm way off base on any of this stuff, let me know. Send me an email, contact me here, leave a comment on a video, whatever it is. And, if you're attending any of our upcoming trainings or events, make sure you connect with us there. Again, Chris solo. We'll have Jayson back next week. Hopefully, maybe I'll put the whole show on him so he can know the fear of trying to come up with stuff randomly and on the fly. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next time.